Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our April E3 for the IVM Foundation. And we are very blessed today to have Miss Ebony and Miss Jill here to talk to us about inclusion. And my name is Amy Fitzpatrick. I'm the Director of Marketing for IAVM. I would like to ask that if anyone in attendance has questions at any point in time throughout the discussion, if you could please just put those in the Q&A section of your Zoom. We will address any questions that you may have at the end of the session today and give ample opportunity for Ebony and Jill to address those for each of you. But at this point in time, I'm going to go on ahead and turn it over to Miss Ebony so that she can get us started for today. Thanks, Ebony.
Thank you so much. Well, we would like to definitely welcome everyone to this E3 session, talking about a little bit of everything, I will definitely say. I'm Ebony Hattix. I'm chair of the DILC. And for those in being inclusive or those who are listening from their telephones, I am an African-American woman, somewhat straight curly hair, and I am wearing a red shirt, and I'm coming to you from my living room. And I want to introduce to you, for those who don't know, and for those who are very familiar, Miss Jill Schinberg.
Thank you, Ebony. Also for our friends on the phone, I am a white woman with pretty curly hair on top of my head today and glasses. And we're in my home office this afternoon.
Yes. So Jill and I are going to talk to you all just no holds barred. We're just going to go free, and we're going to say how we feel, and we're going to talk about inclusivity. And one of the things that we definitely want to say that the only thing that we're experts in, and Jill, is our own experiences. So that's how we're coming to you all today. So please feel free to ask questions and be open and honest. That's what we're here to do. So Jill, one of the first things that when I called you, I wanted to talk about inclusion. And what is the difference between inclusion and being inclusive and belonging?
Yes, it's an excellent question. They are not mutually exclusive, right? Or they are mutually exclusive. So you can include me in something. You can invite me to join. You can make space available for me, but and that's a good thing to do. It does not mean, however, that I feel like I belong there. So let me give you an example. You started by saying that we are only experts of our own experiences. And our identities, I think, are really important. The various intersecting identities that we each live in are in part how we can define those experiences, or how we're defined by our experiences, right? So I'm a middle-aged white woman. I'm pretty tall, people tell me. I'm fairly thin. I have no physical or mental or emotional disabilities that have been diagnosed. I'm Jewish by heritage. And what I mean by that is I don't attend the synagogue regularly and don't actively participate as a religious Jew. I'm cisgender. I am straight. I don't know what else I'm leaving out, but I'm sure there are others. But all of those things, those are the experiences I can speak from. So inclusion and belonging. When I was in elementary school, I was the only Jewish kid in my class most of the time I was in elementary school. And teachers at that time, when it would come up to Christmas time, right? I was in school in the 70s and 80s. And Christmas parties in your room were a thing, and the moms would come and the kids would bring food and all the stuff. And so we'd have our Christmas party, but in an effort not to exclude the one Jewish kid in the room who would have rather died than be Jewish on that day, right? Because it made me feel separate. That teacher, any teacher, every year this happened, would invite me to give a presentation about Hanukkah.
Wow.
So for me, I also was a really shy kid, so it was like mortifying that I was being asked to get up in front of the room and talk to anybody from a position of authority about anything. But was I being included? Absolutely. Did I feel like I belonged there? Not even a little bit, right? We were talking earlier in preparation for this conversation, I was being horribly tokenized in that moment.
Right. And I've said several times, being from the South, and as you said in previous conversations that we were talking about, how sometimes being inclusive, or people think that being inclusive and saying, hey, I have a friend here who's different from the rest of us, becomes tokenism in a lot of ways. And I shared with you about growing up and going to different people's house, and they're like, oh, we love Black people. We have Ebony over, welcome to the house. And, hey, Ebony's here. Or they felt the need to announce that I was in the room. And I was like, we could be in a completely different area of the house. So it is a difference between including people and welcoming people into a space. But the belonging part of that is the choice of the individual. And that is something that I think we spoke about forcing, kind of forcing along. We want this great diverse bubble, and we want to create it and make it available. But sometimes it boils down to your choice, of if you feel like you belong in that space.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I think it calls into question what we're talking about here is othering, right? Like how does somebody become other? And I mean other with a capital O in this case. So in my example, in elementary school, it was external, right? There was a teacher who was othering me, who was in that case actually racializing me. And that was really confusing, A, for a child, but B, I only understood Judaism as a religion at that time. And there are a lot of different understandings of how that works, what makes someone a Jew. But that othering, is it external? Does somebody else other you, or do you other yourself? And you can do both of those things can occur, but finding, having some self-awareness and self-reflection and finding how that works for you can be really meaningful in terms of finding places and ways to belong, which feels related, by the way. I don't know if this is on your list, but I know that we talked about assimilation. I know it's in the description, and I've been thinking about our assimilation and code switching, the same thing.
So let's go into that. Let's talk a little bit about assimilation, and what does that mean? For those, because there's so much terminology around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and things may not be exactly, the way you perceive it, but sometimes you have to know the definition that you're working with. So kind of tell us a little bit about assimilation.
Well, very briefly, assimilation means blending in. So if you are working to assimilate yourself into a culture or an environment, there are lots of examples of this. The one that we were talking about on the phone a few weeks ago was immigrant populations, and what does an immigrant family do to fit in, or do they choose not to? And there are lots of examples of this, right? And we hear about it with, I don't know, I have my own version of it, but I also remember growing up with other kids who were Korean American, who did everything that the dominant culture did, right? The white kids in that school to blend in. And that's when we hear some of these things that are actually horrible insults that I think some people would call microaggressions, but I don't actually think they're that micro. I think they're becoming more glaring when somebody then says to my Korean American friend in school, well, you don't seem Korean. I mean, you don't have an accent.
Yes.
Or you eat peanut butter and jelly for lunch just like I do. Like, you're the same as me. And that's, I think, previously viewed as microaggression. But I think that we're starting to recognize that it's not so micro anymore.
Right, right. And as we talk from experience, several different things come to mind, especially growing up. And well, you don't sound Black. You don't sound, this way or that way, or you don't seem to, fit a certain stereotype or
right. My idea of what your
idea.
Identity means.
Right. And you're also, sometimes they say, hey, do you code switch, between whether you're at work, who you're around, who your friends are. I think we talk about being our authentic selves, and with everything that's happened, the pandemic, and the way that we have had to cope with all of this in like a very small amount of time, with social injustice, with the things that we see in the media constantly. I think all of those things have played into, code switching, assimilation, different things like that, and how we navigate through. Are we doing those things? Are we not?
Right. I want to jump in and define code switching. Cynthia, thank you for posting that. Yes, for anybody who's not heard the expression code switching before, it's the thing that we do when we adjust our behavior or our speech or our gesture to blend in a particular environment that is somehow different from what is typical or dominant for us individually. In fact, just last week, I had Joe Levy as a guest in one of my classes, and he mentioned code switching. And we talked about code switching as something that we're describing now. We're socially talking about it as being bad. Like, I shouldn't have to behave a certain way to fit in if I'm in a meeting and everybody at the table is male and I'm the only girl, right? I should not have to adjust my behavior so that those men feel more comfortable having a lady in the room. Mm-hmm. So generally, that's how we talk about code switching. There's a podcast, actually, a great podcast called Code Switch. So oftentimes it's said with this negative connotation, but when Joe brought it up in class last week, he talked about it from sort of an organizational psychology perspective of what's good about code switching, right? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes when there is a power differential present, especially, I'm in a position of power, if I adjust my behavior to make somebody more comfortable, especially somebody subordinate to me in some way, then am I not actually making the situation better? Isn't that a possibility, right? To help make somebody more comfortable, feel more equal, feel like they belong in that space. So I think that, code switching certainly could have its benefits. And for anybody who is hearing that for the first time, or is thinking like, well, I'm never the only woman at the table in a meeting because I'm a dude, or whatever that is, everybody has had some version of this experience. I think that an example I used in class is that baby showers used to traditionally be just women, right? But when the husband walks through the room and everything stops, like the women go silent, and then the man's behavior in that situation is often altered. Mm-hmm. In order to respond to the environment. That is also code switching. So if you dig deep enough, that you have had, everybody on the call today, I'm sure, has had some experience of code switching. I just saw a comment pop up from Michelle, was it?
Yes, we did have the she said that she thought about the negative connotations of code switching, but before it had the label, she thought it was just surviving. And this is what, you know, I have to do to be heard. And, you know, that brings up another, you know, question that we have received before about how do I help employees feel more safe to take advantage of an open door if they say, because of past experiences, they were unwilling to trust that open door policy. We talk about the difference in power there. And then you say code switching could make somebody else feel more comfortable. How would you kind of, you know, how would you approach that question?
That's interesting. That could be a strategy, using the positive spin on code switching in that situation. Like, how can you build trust with that person if you know that you're working with someone who has trouble trusting an employer? Power differential is very real, and there's no way to remove that. That exists, right? And you and I were talking earlier about a power differential can be in authority, like a supervisor and an employee. It can be cultural, somebody who is white with somebody who is not white. There is cultural power at play that is important to have some awareness of. But ultimately, you can't force somebody to trust you, right? You can't, there's no way to make somebody trust you. And that got me, fortunately, some of the questions that we received for everybody watching today, we got to see them a little bit in advance. So we had a little bit of time to think on them. And one of the things I was thinking about with this one is about vulnerability. And there's this great quote that I may be slightly misquoting by Brene Brown. If you're familiar with her, she has a lot of TED Talks. She's, you know, friend of Oprah, that sort of lady. She's a sociology professor in Houston, I believe. And she says, the difficult thing is that vulnerability is the first thing I look for in you and the last thing I'm willing to show you. And it's because that in you, it's courage, and in me, it's weakness. So I think that that's something that we really have to consider, especially when we're in a position of power, in terms of helping people that we want to be able to trust us, even if they've had a previous negative experience, hopefully not at our organization, but these things do happen. I'm actually gonna, if I can, I'm gonna post a link to an article. It's a brief interview with Brene Brown and Adam Grant, who is an organizational psychologist. And it's this brief interview, written interview about vulnerability in the workplace, because I think that for some of us, we think about vulnerability as something we do with our intimate partners, right? Or that hopefully we do with those people. But how do we take that to work? How's that okay, right? How do we do that and not be telling, you know, airing our dirty laundry and telling our employees and our staff and our colleagues a bunch of really personal stuff that's actually none of their business, but more than it's none of their business, it's not their burden, right? You don't want to, that's not where that goes. That's where you go tell that to your therapist, right?
Right. And sometimes we have to realize that there are, things have changed a lot in the organizations of the world, and our bubbles seem to not just coincide anymore, more they overlap and they flow into each other. You know, before maybe your best friend worked at another organization, maybe now she's in a different department, he or he is in a different department than you at the same organization. So you have two relationships. You have a work relationship, and then you have an outside relationship that has this friendship where maybe it goes to a deeper level than at work. And I say that also to bring in Max's comment and question, where he said many people were raised to use certain terms and language that are outdated and offensive. And how can we train our staff who were raised like to correct themselves and not take offense to it or be defensive when corrected? And, you know, that's an interesting question.
It's a good question, Max. I think that, I think we have a responsibility to speak up, right? That's what allyship is. So if we fancy ourselves allies, we are obliged to speak up if somebody is using vocabulary that is no longer socially acceptable, or perhaps even in your employee handbook as something that is terminology that is not used in this workplace. But how do you do so without offending people? You cannot take responsibility. I say this carefully. How somebody feels, how somebody responds to something, you can't control.
Right.
So there's no guarantee that there is any way to do this where nobody will ever get offended. Mm-hmm. So I think that being gentle, operating with empathy, and Max, you've already indicated that you have that in your question by saying, you know, some people came up at a time that was acceptable vocabulary. So it's not, you're recognizing that it's not that they're using language maliciously necessarily. I actually go through this with my mom on a pretty regular basis. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And her feelings are very easily hurt. So I try to gently continue to remind her about the same things. And do I think my mother is a bigot? I don't. I think her mother was a bigot, though. In fact, I know that's true. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the one with my mom, she uses Oriental to describe people from the Asian continent. And it's hard for her to remember why we're not using that word anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, Oriental is still a word that we use to describe things like rugs.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, that brings up, we had a question about inclusivity regarding new and tenured employees and the treatment between the two. And I think there was the word privilege used in there and how it relates to inclusivity. I think you have to be gentle, like you said, with anything that you're approaching, whether they're new or old, any kind of term, but you have to be able to have the conversation with people. And I think people are more apt to have those conversations in a one-on-one setting. I don't think there's going to be one way that we could describe that would, you know, be the correct all, fix all, you know, way to do things. I think you have to take it as an individual basis and, you know, talk about the whys and why are you using that word? One, because like you said, like Max said, it could be the way they were raised. And when you're raised a certain way, it's in you, it's ingrained, you know, and a moment to reprogram yourself. And that's if you're willing to reprogram how you were trained and taught. Especially, I think when we talked before, Jill, I mentioned being from the South and tradition. Tradition is huge. We do this out of tradition, or we do this because of tradition. And sometimes, you know, I'll say younger generations, they don't want that. They don't follow that same flow. And, you know, as somebody who's kind of in the middle, born in 82, you know, we've got a little bit of the tradition and we've got a little bit of the new, and making things work is a little tricky. So,
well,
I think,
yeah, I just was gonna, you know, I really like, Ebony, that you always include being from the South. in how you think about your own identities. And I think that I like it because, well, I like that it's explicit to you, but I also like it because now I live and work in the South, at least by my standards. This is the South. It's south of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. But I'm a Chicagoland native who spent all of my life, my adult life, my child life, all of it until now, north of the Mason-Dixon line. So there's a lot that I don't understand about the culture here. Although it doesn't feel that mysterious to me, once in a while, somebody says something that I just, like, I don't know how to understand it, right? So I love that every time you mention being a Black woman from the South, I'm reminded that it's not just like, first of all, you're more than a Black woman, and that really means something. And being a Black woman from the South must then mean it's different than being a Black woman from the North, right? And so I really look for both the similarities that I have with other people, like immediately, we're both women. You know what I'm talking about when I say I'm the only woman at the table at the meeting. I know you know what that is. But also the differences, right? Like, so, okay, well, but you're a Black woman at the table. I'm a white woman at the table. My strategy when I was coming up in the industry was to go for the, like, one of the guys method. And that totally worked for me. However, now I'm asking myself the question, okay, I've got students who are 25 years younger than I am. It should be different now.
Right.
But is that the strategy they should be using? Like, should I encourage them to do that? I don't know. I feel like they shouldn't have to do that. And then what does it mean that you were from the South? Because what I understand from some of my students who are from deeper South than I am in Lexington is that being accommodating is a cultural, like, it's in the culture of the South. So what does that mean? I mean,
right.
Was being one of the guys a thing for you? Was that an option? Was it your style?
And I think that's what it boils down to. Everybody's experience is different. And me being an African-American woman from the South may be completely different from the next person who is also an African-American woman from the South. I think that's one of the important things that we really want people to know is that everybody is different. And just because you have your group of people that you mingle with, that you're, with, and, one may represent this group or be a part of this group, the experience is not the same. So for me, when I say, we grew up in the tradition of, or I grew up in the tradition of, you don't disrespect your elders, and trying to correct them would be one of those things. You don't correct someone who is older than you. Of course, that kind of fades as you get older and you're like, wait a minute. And you do it gently, as well as one of the things that I learned growing up as a child, it was yes, ma'am, no, sir. And when people who were born north or came down, they would be like, do not call me ma'am or sir.
Right.
It's ingrained in me to say ma'am or sir, or I'm being disrespectful. Calling an older woman by her first name or an older gentleman was another one. It was always Ms. Riz or Miss, Sir, Mr., those types of things. And people, as I got older, and of course, my circle and my sphere got bigger, being around different people and people from other places, especially college. They were like, why do you say this? Why do you do that? Why do, what's the thing? Can all Black people dance? I mean, that type of thing, God. Those types of questions. Like we said, we're putting it all out there. Because I've been that person that people come to and they ask the question, and it's a lot of pressure to be that person who answers all the questions. So
Yes.
one of the things about when we're creating these inclusive environments that we're trying to do, there's not going to be that if you do A, if you do B, if you do C, it's all going to work out and everybody's going to love each other. Because, you know, it's like, I made this analogy before of oil and vinegar, oil and water, you know, whatever, you shake it up and for a while it all works together and it's great in a salad. But at some point they're going to separate and they bond. People bond with whom they like to bond with. Of course, you want it to be a respectful space. And I think there's a way to do that. Even like I said, being from the South, you know, there's a respectful way to do certain things that can work for everybody. But you can't force it. You can't force the bonds of everybody to belong, but you can create the inclusive space, which is why I thought it was so important for us to understand that there's a difference between those two. But being Southern, I can't speak for all Southern people. I can speak for how—
What?
Ebony, I can speak for Ebony. And that is, you know, that's one of the things that I try to do, because, you know, it's a lot of assumptions about Southern people as well.
Yeah, well, I think that that really speaks to our humanity in a particular way, right? Humans as a species categorize in order to understand things, right? It's part of the scientific method. So part of what it must be happening is like, oh, well, thank goodness I know someone from the South. She can give me the lowdown on what I'm experiencing here. Even though I know intellectually you are not every woman in the South, but you are a woman in the South with whom I have frank conversation. Therefore, I know that I can call this woman from the South and say, hey, can you help me out with this? What do you think about it?
Right.
Now, and I trust that you will remind me that you are not the only woman in the South, but it does provide information, right? You become a certain kind of resource to me. And this plays into, there's so many, like you have to search yourself with all of these things and not for some, you know, magic elixir to solve these problems, because it doesn't work like that, right? Like Miss and Mr. everybody. In Lexington, Kentucky, I am Miss Jill, and I accept that. In Chicago, that's ridiculous. Stop calling me that. So it just, you know, outside of the South, using a Miss anything doesn't make any sense to me. The only time I was called Miss Jill is when I taught ballet to children, because that's how you do it in dance classes. They call you Miss whoever, right? And now that I'm middle-aged and people are calling, I have students I advise, graduate students I advise, who are calling me Miss Jill because they're in like the deep Florida South. But, and I, you know, it's fine. I accept it here. It's fine. Oh, there was something else I was thinking about that I wanted to jump in. Oh yeah, there's a recording somewhere in the state of Utah, a video recording of me having to explain the story of Hanukkah at a Mormon family's Christmas party. And listen, for anybody who's watching this, especially somebody who is not Jewish or not married to somebody Jewish or whatever, you do not want me to explain Judaism to you. I am the wrong person. So also there's this video.
Wow. We've had a few people comment in the chat that says, you know, it's becoming exhausting being the spokesperson for your culture when you're the only minority in the room. So, and then imagine if people would be more receptive to the content of one's character rather than how they look or their racial makeup. Imagine all the hurdles that could be resolved. And those things speak to some certain truths that when you see somebody, you know, if to look at you, Jill, I would not know that you are of Jewish heritage. I would not know.
I know this.
I mean, because there are plenty of people, plenty of white women who have curly brown hair. I wouldn't think of that. So some of these things and some of these traits that we look for or these social cues and things that we're just taught, you know, or assumed.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that, you know, our instinct to categorize in order to understand is natural. But I think this raises another thing about difference or marginalized identity or just any identities. Some of our identities are visible and some of them are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, you know, people may not assume that you are from the South. Why? Because I don't hear a really deep Southern drawl, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can't necessarily make that assumption in the same way you wouldn't have assumed my particular heritage. And I think that body politics play into this also, right? We're a very visual culture. So the things we see, skin color, hair texture, size, ability, how we dress, how we present ourselves, and the assumptions that are made based on what we see are really, really loud. And we do have to be careful. And I think that there are all kinds of things that we see, we assume, and then we, you know, I saw a massage therapist recently who is a woman who identifies as a woman of color.
Mm-hmm.
She has also dark curly hair, curlier than mine.
Mm-hmm.
And was telling me a story about going to the emergency room, and it sounded to me like what she was telling me was that the ER check-in person assumed that she was Black, assumed, like, checked the African-American box. And African-American, right, that's tricky. Not all Black people are of African descent.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that this massage therapist is Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
And may or may not have been insulted that she was assumed to be African American.
Right.
So, you know, we do have to be careful. Amy, we're getting pinged. I see it.
Yes.
Oh gosh, we could go on for hours.
We could. I mean, and that's the same thing. And I did see that Victor also reminded us that there are African American people that are Jewish. Yes. You know, yes. I mean,
yes, and not just Sammy Davis Jr., who converted and
right.
was then owned by Jewish people everywhere. Terrible.
Yeah.
And thank you, Bren, for this correction. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
That we didn't make up. Well, we did actually make up the scientific method. Thank you for that.
Yes. So, with all those things being said and all that we've discussed in the conversation, there's also, I was walking for exercise with my 15-year-old niece who stated that they were going to do a class project of taking different regions, different countries, and talking about culture and the different things, you know, relative to that area. And she was talking with a friend who had chosen Jamaica, I believe. And she was talking about what she should do with the project. And it was so funny because, like I said, my niece is 15 years old. She's in the 9th grade. And she told her friend straight out, be careful, because there is a difference between appropriation and appreciation. Mm-hmm. And I thought that that was amazing, one, for a 15-year-old. And that's me just thinking where my 15-year-old mind was completely somewhere else. But for her to be, you know, brave enough to say that to her friend And just for the sake of disclosure, her friend was a young white lady, young white girl, and Ari is a Black African-American girl. So for her to say that and to start having those conversations openly and honestly at the age of 15, I was amazed. And
that's fantastic. Start them young, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the time, that's the problem, going all the way back to Max's question, is the sooner that we can speak openly about everything we're talking about today with kids. I mean, kids are smart. They're smart and they're curious, right? Like, they're naturally curious as children. And, you know, one of the things that sometimes we talk about in the university community is that it's educators' job to just like wipe the curiosity off of all of them, right? Just wipe out the curiosity and tell them what they need to know. And that is a flaw of education as a system, right? But this, the talking about it, we've been talking about discourse and how important that is to our humanity. So even some of the other things, some of the other ideas that we haven't touched on that were submitted ahead of time, I feel like, you know, the being mindful about your own curiosity, right? Some of these questions, I know we talked about them in advance. Like, can you learn or understand someone who is different from you? Well, how badly do you want to know? Because in some ways, in that regard, it's like learning anything, like constant curiosity and interrogation of your own assumptions, and talking to other people. I presume most of the people who are here today are deep thinkers like that and want to engage in this work. So, you know, keep doing that and do lots of it. If it hurts your brain to do that, there's not a pamphlet for this, I don't think. And mistakes will be made.
Yes.
In fact, I made one today and I got corrected, and now I know. So it's that being open to that, that's actually the kind of vulnerability that I think we're talking about in the workplace. Is have you created a culture that allows for that, for space for that? Because if you're always right, then I don't know how you would make any progress.
And I think another thing that we have to add to is there should be some grace. There has to be some grace, and there has to be some mercy given, because when you're having these open conversations like this, you know, there are feelings involved. There are emotions to every person, every human, and the way they feel about certain things. But I think over a cup of coffee, it can be discussed. I think in an open room, as long as it's, you know, like we said, safe, open space to say what you want to say, you know, you can set the stakes, you know, early. Hey, this is what we want to do. This is safe. This is, you know, if we're going to have a confidential conversation, we state that in the beginning. This is a confidential conversation between you and I. You know, we have to have the conversations. We have to make the efforts. And there are going to be, like you said, some people who are the early adopters that come along and they say, I'm going to champion. And there's going to be the people who are on the fence. And then there's going to be the people who say, I don't want any part of it until it affects them. And those who are running the race of trying to get things done and trying to put things out there, we get tired, but you keep moving, keep fighting, keep going. But the sooner you have these conversations, the sooner I think an understanding will come. And if you don't know where someone's from, and I've always been this way, if I don't know, I'm going to ask. And how do I ask? how do I ask? If I didn't know Jill, but I saw Jill and I heard Jill speak, I would go to Jill and say, hey, Jill, would you like a cup of coffee? If you drink coffee, if you like juice, let's go to a juice bar. But let's go somewhere and let's have a conversation. Or can I call you? I think those are your starters. If you want the plan, or you want things to work, and you want to form small groups and things like that, I think that's your start. You find somebody who knows something, or may have an answer for you, or somebody who knows somebody else. You find your resource. I think that's one thing that I admire about kids these days. They will check the internet. They will fact check you.
Right.
And they're a little more self-aware, of what they're saying. And I think that's what we have to do for a lot of questions that are asked. We have to become self-aware and think about what we're saying, what we're doing, and how we're doing it. I think that's a big part of it. Huge
Agreed.
part.
And it's hard, right? It's hard work. And yet the question of like, when do you call things out, right?
Right.
Ooh, there was another great article. There was this article in the New York Times not terribly long ago about, instead of calling out, what if we just called in?
Oh, I love that.
And this was fantastic, because that is a little bit, well, it really resonated with me. It was an opinion piece. But that really resonated with me, because this was related to cancel culture that is such a prevalent moment that we seem to be in. And when is that appropriate, and when is that not the right solution? And, it plays into the work of artists quite a lot, right? Like, we know some really brilliant, talented people who have done some really terrible things. And how do we reconcile that? And what do we do? What's okay to do? And what I'm seeing in classes right now, particularly undergraduate classes, is what some of this is doing is it's silencing them. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to participate. And that's actually really scary, that we've got a generation of young adults coming up who think that they better keep their mouths shut because it's not acceptable to make a mistake.
Right.
Look, it's Amy.
Hi, Amy. Just before we pop in, I do want to say Max Long states that many people avoid having conversations like this because they're afraid of saying something wrong and being uncomfortable in the situation. But learning to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable can be a tremendously beneficial, which I completely agree with you, Max, because that's how you learn. That is how you learn. Being uncomfortable with a situation, the more you talk about it, the more you learn about it, the more comfortable you'll get with it.
Agreed. Discomfort is the moment of learning, right? And it's related to conflict also, right? Like, we always think conflict is bad, but conflict is actually how we get growth and progress. Not all conflict is good, right? But not personal conflict, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that we probably have a lot of people who are also feeling really uncomfortable when they're in the more privileged position. Right? And that's okay, because the person that you are engaging with who is in a less privileged position, they are more uncomfortable than you every day in their lives. So stop your bitching.
Yep.
Just get with it. Embrace the discomfort.
Embrace it.
If you are ready, we have about 8 minutes left in the session, and we have 3 great questions in our Q&A. So I'm just going to address it to both of you, and if you want to answer, feel free to, and if you don't, that's okay too. From an anonymous attendee, we have the question: how do we make people feel included and have a sense of belonging when there is a language barrier with our staff?
Ebony, is this something that you deal with at work at all?
I'm trying to think of if there is. I can't say that I have personally had this issue as of yet. However, if I have the issue, the one thing that I have always done is I will try to use a translator person to say, I'm not sure what, how to say certain things or how to phrase them, but I have used a translator before to say certain things. So to say welcome, or, try to smile, or try to give kind of body gestures to say that you're welcoming someone in the space and get to know them. Hey, you like tea, coffee? What do you like? You can always put something in a translator and see if it translates, and try to learn from them. How do they communicate? And make it open.
I think that if there are, for example, materials that if you have materials related to inclusivity that you are distributing, make sure that they are in the languages of the people that you are working with. I think that's, depending on the specific circumstances, of course, that may or may not be possible, but there are good translation services out there.
Yes.
Okay. And from Jason Blackwell, we have the question, what steps can we take to create inclusion in our venues without staff feeling like we are devaluing past history and or meaningful traditions?
Oh, Jason, so glad you're here. Hi, Jason. Jason's an old friend. Wow, that's a good question. Past tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Ebony, you were talking about tradition earlier.
Yes. And I think one of the things that we have to realize is that you may not be the expert in the different cultures of people in your organization. However, asking the simple questions and saying, and I think this is what Jason is talking about, but letting them know that you're not devaluing by saying, hey, I would like to know more, or asking the questions and, saying, hey, admit that you don't know about something. Everybody has a story, and everybody will tell, a lot of people will be vulnerable enough to tell their story if you ask the questions, and ask your group, is this devaluing? Am I missing something? Should we talk about Black History Month? If we've never talked about Black History Month, I would like to talk about Black History Month. How do I do that? You have to make, sometimes getting people involved in what we're going to do and how that message goes and how it goes out further past the community is when other people get involved, and the people who have the passion for it. So I think when you start talking to your employees and people in your organization, and not just on the executive level, if that makes sense, then I think you will come up with a better project or a better focus and a better statement.
I would add that, and I would posit that some of this actually goes back to being cautious around tokenism too, right? And that really opening the conversation is important, because it's very tricky, like go to the people you're trying to serve and ask the question, but are you also asking them to do unpaid labor for you in the process? Because that's actually not okay. So I think ultimately, I think trust has been a recurring theme of our conversation today. And I think that in response, in part, at least to Jason's question, in order to really make progress there, trust is going to be pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is from Bryn Walker, and Bryn has asked, like the scientific method, identifying people by color is also a European construct from the 19th century. And we know that race is a social construct and not a scientific genetic one. What is your opinion of us letting these constructs go and how that might impact progress?
I say, I vote yes. Let's do that. I do want to, I love this question. I do want to say, yes, I agree. Race is a construct. I also believe that to be true. I don't know, though, that everybody participating today believes that or has even given it any thought. Like, what is a social construct? Not everybody is in that headspace. So I think that's important to mention. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I don't need race for anything.
Right. I concur.
I don't know. Thank you very much. No, it's making me think about where we left off our early conversation. There was a talk a webinar I participated in on Monday evening that actually got into this on the outskirts of that conversation, where race is a social construct, and this is some of the impact that it's had. I was a participant, not a panelist on this, and what that's meant for our democracy. It was kind of directly tied into that because it's very much a Western construct, correct, Brent? I know you're going to tell me if I'm wrong.
Our next question is from an anonymous attendee who's asking, as an employer with many, many staff, where does one even begin in terms of employee training? That could actually probably be one of our next E3s.
That's a good idea. Hugs all around. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm not a hugger at work. But yeah, that's a tough one. That could be its whole own session, I think.
Mm-hmm. But I do want to say that I think even when you're asking questions about employee training on things such as this, I think that the culture of your organization is just as important as your training of things to change. So I think sometimes even when the questions that were pre-given to us, one of the common things is what does your culture reflect? You need to check that as well as, your training and different materials, but what does your culture reflect?
Yes, it relates to like, show me, don't tell me.
Yes.
Right? Show me, demonstrate the behavior that you want, set a good example, cultural aspects of your workplace, show, don't tell. I mean, also tell, it's a good reminder and reinforcement, but telling isn't enough and it's not a good starting place, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a question, and before I get to the last one in the Q&A, we had a question pop up in the chat a few moments ago that I missed that was from Victor Cohen asking, many facilities are starting to develop staffing positions responsible for diversity and inclusion. How are they training for these positions? Are they preparing them to handle these uncomfortable conversations as well as you ladies have?
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually have this same question. This is happening in my workplace. I am a faculty at the College of Fine Arts at the University of Kentucky, and the college has talked about a diversity and inclusion officer position, and the Dean's Advisory Council, which I sit on, saw the description and said, no, this is not, we don't think we should have this, but this is not right. Please go back to the drawing board. It was grossly underpaid and required specific expertise, and they were considering it being a faculty appointment. There are no faculty in our college that are experts in this area. So yes, I have the same question, Victor. How are those people going to be trained to do this work? What are they studying? What are their interests? What's the experience of practical application other than the social skills to have a conversation about? I wouldn't presume to take such a position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it since it's so new, I think it's going to be a collaboration of looking at what's been out there and what's out there to learn and to be certified in, and the different certifications. And I know that within the past, I think it's been about 3 weeks, there was a university out of Florida that has a DEI training that several people within our organization are going through, and we'll let you know the outcome of it. But it says there's a diversity, equity, inclusion kind of certification course in training. But basically what it has been us listening to conversations like this, talking about these things, trying to understand what they are, and take all the terminology, because it's a lot of terminology that we use when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and understanding it and breaking it down for people. So
it is a lot. I think also, just for anybody out there who happens to run a venue on a university campus, take advantage of university resources, because every university right now, especially state and Commonwealth institutions, are paying a lot of attention here. So there are a lot of free resources on campus that as staff members, you probably have access to. So just know that there's a lot out there right now. And I think it's also worth remembering that a lot of us who work in the industry didn't train to do the jobs that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got trained in our first job, right? You worked in the box office as a ticket seller, right? Or in my case, I was an usher in college, and that job I had training for, right? But beyond that, it was, here are your keys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if anybody is well suited to figure out what's important and how to disseminate information, folks in this industry can.
Yes.
All right, ladies, we're running a little bit over, but we do have one more question. And since this is from my boss, if it's okay, we'll go ahead.
Hi, Brad.
So the last question is from Brad Main, and he asks Jill specifically, as a venue manager and academic, you're such a great expert in guiding the general populace in our industry and being knowledgeable and being correctly involved in equity and inclusive initiatives, unconscious bias, unilateral acceptance, proper communication, and so much more. Are you available as a consultant to venue professionals?
Brad, such a smart cookie. Yes, I am. I am. Thank you for asking that question. In particular, the work that we're doing right now with Venue Management School, Brad and I spoke earlier this week, we believe that to be scalable. So if there are venues that are trying to understand how to do some of this work at home, yes, I would be happy to talk to you about that.
Yes.
That's such a lovely question. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Ebony, for inviting me to this. I really was honored that you thought of me.
Well, thank you so much. And that is definitely on behalf of the DILC committee. I do not work alone. They are wonderful. They are an amazing group of individuals, of venue managers that work together. And I will say they are awesome. But thank you all so much for attending. If anyone has any questions, please let us know. The DILC is here as a resource, and we work under Brad Main. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both.
Thanks, everybody,
for your time today and for joining us, and just the open and honest conversation, because this is exactly what this particular webinar series is about. It's about the things that need to be communicated that aren't necessarily always being communicated openly and honestly. So thank you both. I appreciate it. And I do call you both Miss Ebony and Miss Jill because I am from Kentucky, and that's the way we were talking.
I remember that, Amy. I know. I get from you, it's fine.
Yeah. Part of my culture.
And it's better than ma'am, right? That makes it, if you ma'am me, I feel kind of old. But now I am kind of, so I get it. It's fine.
My granny always said, you don't call any woman ma'am. You can call a gentleman sir, but do not call a woman ma'am. You can call her Miss in her first name only.
I love her. I love her.
100 years old, and she's like, I don't want to feel 100 years old and be called ma'am.
I understand.
Fantastic.
Thank you all so very much for your time today. And we look forward, Ebony and everyone who's on as an attendee from the Diversity and Inclusive Leadership Committee, to see what you guys have for us next month. These are always so amazing and insightful. And to everyone who attended, thank you so very much. We hope that you enjoyed the session as much as we did. And if you do have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. And have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.